Ready to go in? I'd like to call to order a city council budget workshop. The date is August 29th and the time is 6:04 p.m. Madam Clerk, roll call.
Mayor Ronnie Felder, Chairperson Douglas Lawson,
Here.
Chair Pro Tem Chadwick McCoy,
Here.
Councilperson Kashama Miller Anderson,
Present.
Councilperson Shirley Lanier provided written notice to the clerk's office that she will not be in attendance at tonight's meeting. Councilperson Glenn Spiritus.
Here.
City Manager Jonathan Evans. Acting City Clerk Deborah Hall McCullen is present. City Attorney Don Nguyen. Mr. Chair, you have a quorum. You may proceed.
Have a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilman McCoy.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're going to go into introduction purpose. Mr. Evans.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Tonight's budget discussion is to go over primarily the capital projects that the city of Riviera Beach is looking to put forward in its 5-year capital improvements plan. As the board knows, that in the capital improvements plans, primarily only the one fiscal year that you're in is the year that is provided for, where there is funding that is incorporated in the fiscal year 2025 budget. And so as we go through the presentation this evening, we're going to focus largely on capital. Our intent is to bring you all a balanced budget at your first reading, which is September 5th, that will go into greater specificities concerning the positions, the reclassifications, and the like. And we did want to spend some more time specifically talking about the capital projects. And then if the board would like a little bit more time with the 100-page slideshow, you can discuss that with staff at a greater level at your September 5th meeting. And so the intent is really to get your input and feedback on the capital budget, and then move forward with, and if the board would like to move forward, staff is prepared to be able to get into greater specificities with regards to other items contained in the document. So we'll talk about a program that, we'll go over the budget calendar, but then we'll talk about a program that staff is asking for the board's consideration to address some of the challenges that are present in our educational institutions here in the city of Riviera Beach. We have our 5-year capital improvements plan, and then a 5-year utility capital improvements plan, and then some additional discussion. So the intent is for us to try to capture the board's attention for the duration of the items that are on the agenda for this evening. So important dates is the first reading of the budget for the proposed millage rate and the tentative budget. That is Thursday, September 5th. That is where the board would take its first action, and that is what's been provided for in the public notices for the public to provide additional perspectives concerning the budget and the millage rate. And then your second and final reading is Wednesday, September 18th of 2024. Those dates cannot conflict with the school board or the county for the purposes of their budget exercise. And so that's why you have a deviation from some of the days that we normally meet. So the first item that we wanted to get some perspective from the board is the READ program. This is a program that staff is asking for the board's consideration. This is an acronym and a program that staff has been having conversations with, and I've the board's consideration in the inclusion READ program in the fiscal year 2025 budget. The READ program stands for Riviera Beach Education Advancement Directive. This is a program that is born from the city council, assuming the city council support. And this looks to make some quantifiable and quantifiable progress with respect to the proficiency that we have at our schools, from English language arts, math, science, and social studies. We know that with the article that was in the paper not too long ago, that some of our academic institutions in our community are struggling, and that we think as a city, invariably, we need to take a more proactive approach. And so this particular monies would be to target specifically West Riviera, Washington, Lincoln, Bethune, and John F. Kennedy. This program would look to provide resources, whether it's through the school or through the city or through non-for-profit agencies, to play a more participatory role, because we know that there are challenges for our students, whether it's in the school year, or we've also added some staff augmentation elements to some of our programming and had tutoring and study halls that are provided as part of some of our recreational programs to really try to meet kids and parents where they are. One of the things that is important to this program is we want measurables and data that we can show that there is success that is happening in the schools and in the students that may be part of the target population. And there's a variety of ways for us to look at doing this. I did provide some information to our school board representative, Mr. Ferguson, and he sent me a correspondence today. And hopefully you all have received the same correspondence, that he does support the city of Riviera Beach making some investments similar to other communities. Delray and Boca and Boynton, I believe, in Wellington, have made some investments as part of their budget process to see some improvements in their school. The monies that we have set aside for this particular investment is from capital projects, so it is one-time monies unless the board wants to appropriate additional monies for this program in subsequent years. But we wanted to create basically a pilot program that will allow for us to move forward with this, share the measurables with the board, and then from there, the board can look in future years to successfully put additional monies in the budget in a reoccurring basis. And so what we're looking for from the board is direction and perspective. How would you like us to structure this? Where would this primarily be housed? Is this something that you would like to see the educational committee serve in a more active role? And that's one of the things that I have waited till this moment to get some direction from the board, because I am in the process of drafting that the resolution that provides for the additional duties and responsibilities, and based on the direction that we got from the board at the last meeting where we talked about the Education Advisory Committee. And so at this time, Mr. Chair, we would like to indulge some comments from the board to, one, see if you are in favor of a program such as this, if you would like to see a program developed in this likeness, and then if the board is in support of $250,000 being set aside in the fiscal year 2025 budget for activities intended to improve the academic success of our students in the schools that I mentioned. So we are prepared to answer any questions and seek guidance from the board as to how you wish to proceed with regards to this particular item that staff is asking for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Commissioners? Mr. Evans, I'm sorry, Commissioner McCoy, go ahead. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Evans, first, let's further clarify, what do you mean by set aside from the capital dollars?
If I may? Yes. So as part of our capital budget, if there's projects that are under budget or projects that are over budget or projects that weren't completed, there are monies invariably that gets carried forward for capital projects. And so what we wanted to do is identify a funding source that we can utilize one-time monies for the purposes of bringing this particular initiative forward. So it doesn't take it out of general revenue. It doesn't result in an increase in ad valorem. So you would be taking monies that would be normally set aside in your capital projects to help facilitate this particular pilot project.
Follow up. Thank you. So you said both, that you were looking to see if we wanted to make it recurring, and then help me understand, is this just the initial ask is going to be coming out of capital?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Recognize.
Yes, the initial ask would be coming out of capital, and we didn't want to make it recurring until the board had some measurables to see if the investment was suitable and accomplished what the board's intent is as a part of the program.
Follow up. Mr. Manager, so how do we arrive at $250,000? I mean, why not 25,000? Seemingly, you're just gonna ask the board for authorization to put $250,000 aside. We don't know what the needs assessment looks like. We don't know we don't even know who's gonna administer it. I don't disagree that there's a need. Trust me, I was startled when I seen that article as well. However, I want to know that the program is going to get built out, or we know what model we're going to utilize before setting up $250,000 for it, because I can imagine if this goes to a nonprofit, I mean, folks will find a way to abuse $250,000 without it actually reaching out to as many people. And I've heard enough times there's a number of different resources in the school district. So I just don't understand, without us having a program built out, why we would go ahead and start the process of putting $250,000 in our, actually, it would come from our capital budget, but it would be operating general revenue dollars. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Councilman Spirit is sure recognized.
if there's a question,
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Go ahead, Mr. Evans.
So when we looked at the program and then we looked at some of the other institutions, because I did have a conversation with the superintendent as well as the school board member some time ago about what are other government agencies doing and how are they assisting in facilitating some academic success in their respective neighborhoods. And they do have programs that are built out. And so what we did is, and I think Wellington is $500,000 as it relates to their contribution. So what we wanted to ask the board for consideration is, if we put the monies aside in the budget, we're going to build out the program and get the board to adopt what the program and the program matrix are and all the specificities behind that. And then that would be the program that moves forward. And so that's a situation whereby you can look at it, hey, is this a grant program where non-for-profits that are going to target this particular, the issues that we're having in our schools would be eligible for? Do you want to utilize it as a funding mechanism that you can assist in providing for additional tutoring services for Riviera Beach residents? Is it a situation where you want to partner with the local schools that I had mentioned and provide some, aftercare that has an education component to it? So there's a variety of different ways, and we've looked at different programs throughout other agencies. But we wanted to understand if the board is amenable to entertaining the concept and setting aside monies. Now, if the board says, $100,000 or $50,000 or $25,000 is what you're comfortable with, we can certainly make that change. But I know that in the conversations that I've had with board members is that we need to do something very quickly. We need to do something that's proactive, and we need to do something that's aggressive, because if we are not intentional about our steps, the concern is that when Riviera Beach High School does invariably come online, that there would be a challenge for some of our students based on the test scores. And what we don't want is a school that it opens, a new high school that has students that are not performing academically where they should be. And so this would be as a way to support those institutions early on and make that investment. So it really boils down to a policy decision where the board feels comfortable and what are some of the measurable outcomes. Because one of the things I do want to make it explicitly clear, our intention is not to buy book bags with this money. It is to see something where you can track. If Jonathan was part of this cohort and participated in this program, you can track whereby the reading scores, the mathematics scores, and the like went up. And even a situation where you challenge the schools that in order for us to allocate and appropriate this money, that we want to see our schools raise a grade level every year until they're all A schools, because we know that there's an economic correlation associated with it. And one of the challenges elements, and our chief of police will tell you, is that, correctional institutions are constructed, predicated on third grade reading scores. And so we want to do something that looks to address that. And so whatever the board's pleasure is, staff can pivot accordingly, but the program would have to be built, and it would have to have a staff person that is assigned as that liaison. and have to manage it, and then invariably report the findings back to you all that we accomplish what the program calls for.
Last thing, Mr. Chair. I went past the third grade, Chief. In fact, I got a master's degree, and I can read pretty darn well. I think he understood.
Mr. Spears?
Evans, I'm still a little confused why this isn't the capital budget, but regardless, of course, I support anything we can do to help, build up the reading scores and math scores and everything else that our kids need here. But have you discussed this with our two representatives on the school board? We have more than one. We have two members on the school board representing Riviera Beach. And have you maybe discussed with them that maybe if they put up 100,000, we'll put up 100,000. If we put up 250, they'll put up 250 above and beyond what they normally have in their budget?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
You recognize Mr. Evans.
I did not have discussions with both our school board members. I did have discussions with the superintendent of schools as well as board member Ferguson with respect to the concept. I did want to see, the board's appetite concerning this concept. One of the things, I don't know if the school district is going to contribute any more monies than they already put in our schools here in Riviera Beach. But one of the things I know we could do is that this money can be leveraged for other non-for-profit philanthropic groups, whether it's the Quantum Foundation or other large entities that provide grants, even grants maybe through the Department of Education where there's some matching elements to it. So our intent is to look to leverage those dollars against other contributions from other entities to help address what the challenges are academically in our community.
You recognize.
I still think that it's very important that you get in touch with the other member and remind them that they represent part of City of Riviera Beach as well, and that we expect them to represent us as well. I'd be more than happy to be at that meeting with you. I'm all for coming up with funds for local matches, for other programs, but I think that this money should be used to be leveraged. And I think the school district should come up front. I mean, $250,000 to them is nothing in the scale of their budget. And for them to match what we're coming up with above and beyond in our budget, I think is something worth a discussion.
You recognize.
We certainly are going to look to attempt to collect any additional contributions by leveraging this money. So if this is a program that the board is amenable in its consideration, certainly we'll have that conversation as quick as if it's time's available this week, or if not, early part of next week, to see if there's some help that the school district will look to do.
I certainly support it, but what I would emphasize is that we maintain control of the funds. I would not suggest giving monies to the schools. I think it's best that we know what is happening and if these gains are being made. I don't know if we want to look at doing, having more tutoring in the aftercare program or setting something up similar to that. But whatever model we go with, we need to make sure that we keep control of the funds. And to Dr. Spiritus's point about the matching, truthfully, I don't think that's going to happen because they already give a lot of those schools extra money because they are Title I. And then you have to deal with the fact of why are they getting extra monies and Lake Worth is not, or Boynton is not. So I highly doubt that would happen. But, I'm not, if we know what type of program we're going to set up, I would be okay with the amount of money. I just would like to see what it is that we're going to do. And then if we do something less than 250,000, I mean, that we can make that adjustment as well. But it's important that we maintain control of what it is that we're going to do.
And Mr. Evans, thank you for presenting this tonight, because one of my goals to talk to my colleagues about was possibly revisiting the community benefits or community grant program. I know we talked about it previously where we issued funds to nonprofits, but we wanted to have some type of measurables structure and controlled the funds. The issue we've had before is colleagues were getting calls and inundated with multiple nonprofits in the community, but the community got used to receiving those grants of $1,000, $1,500, $500 from the commissioners. Once we cut that stream off, a lot of the nonprofits weren't able to sustain providing additional support in the community. So if we use these funds, we just want to have some type of measurables. I would support it, Mr. Evans. But what are those measurables? What is the controlled funds, as my colleague said, and what does the structure look like for those? And also ask that we allocate some additional funds to organizations, not just the Quantum Foundation, who has the matching, but some of the local organizations that are actually impacting directly in the city. Because the Quantum is such a large foundation who does great work, but then you have some of the smaller ones that are right here that can impact kids right in our city. I think since we're on this topic, the Police Athletic League, PAL program, providing some funds, possibly allocating something out of these REIT funds to say, let's give 20, 30,000 out of that to go to programming for the programs that we have established already. So those are some of the things that I would love to kind of see. If we do the 250, have a structure, have measurables, have control of the funds, but allow for the nonprofits to do their work. We do have also the 150 coming Fire Station 87. So allocating those to some type of community, what is it called? Community grant programming as well, so that we can know these funds are going to reading programs, to helping with education. These funds are going to the nonprofit programs, and just creating that program and building it out. So I would definitely support that and possibly even add some additional funds, especially with some of the money that's coming in for the nonprofit sector. Comments? Thank you, Mr. Evans. Councilman McCoy, you're recognized.
Yes. Board Member Miller Anderson said it best. I just need to see a program. And here's the other thing I would hope Board Member Miller Anderson can speak to. So this is going to be a very tough program to implement. The school district, and not just the school district, federal law prohibits sharing students' personal information. So you're going to have a whole FERPA issue, number one. So knowing individually about a child's academic achievement is going to come through some sort of specific waiver or something like that by the parent. And additionally, do we want to be the custodian of that information, as an organization, without any kind of, if there are any exemptions? That's the first part, but I'm more inclined to support something where there's a program built out. Now, for the purposes of the budget, if that's what we need to kickstart, the conceptual approval so staff can build out a plan. I'm also concerned with nonprofits doing it too, because, everybody in town got a nonprofit. And I just don't want to see a situation where we have folks lining up saying that they're going to do it and, we can't trace it. Now, I did also want to also introduce the idea of funding for PAL, because I've had given personal dollars, probably about $1,000, if I can think, probably in the last year and a half, to support those initiatives that PAL is doing, and they're not funded by us, but some kind of way. And against what I initially had desired to do was for us to kickstart it. And considering, we spend a lot of resources with our Parks and Rec, I certainly want to make sure that there is an allocation of support for our Police Athletic League, because, I don't see them just particularly in a season. They're year-round doing something with those kids. In fact, it goes a long way, right? And I thought about it, when we can offer a kid $85 to play some sort of recreation football, but these folks and these kids are out in the communities, painting houses, picking up trash. They're actually not just reaping a benefit off of city government, which I believe they haven't since the initial onset where we first funded, unless there's been something nominal or de minimis. But I certainly want to see a item in there in our budget this year for PAL. And I did get a copy of some of the programming that they were doing, and I certainly want to have that conversation at some point.
Thank you, Councilman McCoy. Thank you. If you want to continue, Mr. Evans.
Yes, Mr. Chair, and so it's safe to say that there is consensus amongst the board for the purposes of developing a program for your consideration. The $250,000 will be set aside as part of the program, and then we bring that forward for you all to approve the program and how the program is administered. And so the funds will not be drawn down until the program is adopted by the city council. So I do want to make that abundantly clear, and certainly I believe in conversations with all of you to some degree. It was always discussed about the local control, that the city maintains the control, because we want to make sure that the funds are being utilized for what the board's intent is. So we'll move forward with developing something for your consideration and review, and then also we'll take a look at, as part of the agenda backup, we'll look at what other entities have done concerning their programs that they've developed, and even some opportunities to use these funds to leverage additional contributions into the fund.
Oh, just one comment, Chair. I think
President.
Chief Coleman is aware of a program that they did in Delray. So that would be something to kind of take a look at as well.
Recognize.
We shared this program with our department directors today at our directors meeting, and Chief Coleman already asked Mr. Sherman what account he's hiding this money. And so I think the chief has already gotten some ideas to how we can tap on these resources. And obviously our chief has been very aggressive as it relates to engaging with our local schools and making sure there's a positive relationship with law enforcement. And so he's definitely going to be involved in the committee that helps draft the program that the board will invariably consider.
Those that were on the education committee or have joined, I don't know if they're officially on, but I'm sure a lot of them will be able to contribute a lot of information as well.
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. We'll definitely make sure that multiple parties are involved, and so the policy and the program is robust, and so the board can have a good understanding what the objectives are, so we can accomplish what the intended outcomes need to be. All right. The next part of the presentation is we're going to get into the capital 5-year capital improvements budget. Mr. Sherman is going to walk you through the capital budgets, and then if there's conversations with respect to the specificities of the capital projects, Mr. Bailey, our city engineer, can get in and share a little bit more granular nuances associated with these projects. Mr. Sherman?
Excuse me. Yes, good evening. Randy Sherman, Director of Finance and Administrative Services. First, we're going to walk through all of the projects that are rolling over from prior years into, them remain in the capital projects, and then we'll walk through the new projects that have been added. Just to walk you through the format of this slide, obviously there's a description of the project on the left. The second column is the project code. You see that a lot on our agenda items when we're referring to a project code. And again, just to let you know, the first 2 digits of the project code is the first year that that project showed up in the capital program. So when you look at that top one and it's 20,002, that means that this has been in the capital project since 2020. The next column over where we have in progress, those are either open purchase orders that are in place or unencumbered funds that have not yet been committed for that project. So that's a combined number. And then the next 5 lines across, again, it's a 5-year capital improvement program. So we laying the funding out over that 5 years. The column second from the right, that is a total of the 5 years from 2025 to 2029. And then the column on the right is the total project cost. I won't read every one of these. I think a lot of these are self-explanatory as you go down. I will point out some highlights. Specifically on this slide, the third item down is the City Hall replacement. That is where we have been budgeting the penny surcharge. So all of those dollars, the council, almost 8 years ago at this point, elected to put all this money to City Hall. Originally, we thought we were going to have about $22 million in this account. By the time we stop receiving funds in December of 2026, we would expect to be closer to $25 million. So again, that's a product of sales tax and the buying. So that number has come in a little higher. Plus, we've been investing the dollars. We have not spent dime one out of this funds. So again, we've got $25 million of cash that can go to the City Hall project. Jump into the next slide. Again, on this slide, I'll point out the second and third lines. The second line is Fire Station 86. That $24,912,000. That is the referendum bond that was passed for $25 million. The next line down is Station 87. That $5.5 million, that is the balance that we have remaining from the 2021 bonds that were sold for the 2 fire stations. On this slide, I'd also point out about halfway down where you see those $500,000 going across 4 years. We have been trying to fund the Parks Master Plan, which was adopted several years ago, at $500,000 a year. So we will continue to do that during this 5-year CIP. And then the other item on this page that I would show.
Councilman McCoy, you're
Sure.
recognized.
Mind going back up, Mr.
Okay.
Sherman, is the third line down to $5.5 million. How much of that is already encumbered for 87?
That 5.5 is all encumbered.
Really?
Yes.
So where we at in terms of project completion?
My understanding is that project will be completed in February 2025.
I would have thought probably sooner than that, since, I mean, we're in August. We're talking about over 6 months from now?
Yep. No, Mr. Bailey, February is still good.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
But
From staff, we wanted to make sure we under promise, over deliver. So February is the worst case scenario, but the information that we're getting from the contractor, and I know Mr. Bailey's cringing back there because he knows that I'm going to say it, is we anticipate close to between the Thanksgiving and Christmas holiday that station should be available for us to invariably move crews in and then, live in the building for a little bit and then have the grand opening for the community. And so but we anticipate that we should be able to be in that facility around Thanksgiving to Christmas time.
Follow up. You were speaking on the Parks Master Plan. The Parks Master Plan called out specifically that amount, 2.2 million?
Oh, the Parks Master Plan was tens of millions of dollars, which is why part of it has been funded through the referendum bonds. But as you can see, that's a 23 project. So since 23, we have been putting $500,000 in. And again, some of it has gone into some, individual pocket parks and, other projects that are listed out in the Parks Master Plan. But that's just the cash funding. That's isn't grants. This is just the cash funding that we've been putting into the program.
You recognize Dr. Spiritus.
So Randy, the $500,000 per year is just cash that we've been budgeting every year and have not really spent. It's been encumbered for this purpose, but we haven't spent the money.
So the number we haven't spent is in the third column. That's the 291,000. That's from all the prior years. And then the $500,000 you see, we will appropriate that in 2026, 2027, 2020, 2029.
Budget, or is that coming out of the bond?
No, this is all cash funded.
All cash funded.
Correct.
Okay.
And the other item that I would point out here is the third one from the bottom, similar to Station 86 at the top. This is the bond referendum for the new police station. You can see we still have $34.9 million unspent at this point. This slide,
Oh, Mr. Chair, if we can
Sure.
go back.
You're recognized.
So, Mr. Sherman, if we have 34.9, at what point do we start design work?
okay, so some of that is actually encumbered.
Well,
Okay,
it's not-
but we haven't actually cut any checks out of it at
Well,
this
why,
point.
why wouldn't it be in progress?
It is in progress. So that 34.9 million is all in progress. We're not budgeting any other additional funds over the next 5 years. That project is there, it's operational. Now, again, part of it has been encumbered for the early stage and the design work and, we'll call it like the phase 1 work. But again, as you can see, we have not actually made any payments out of this project other than the $33,000.
So have we done anything out of the parks master plan, but you have it called out for the next few years? So you planning that the whole entire balance of the referendum dollars are going to be used, plan to put it in there when we start doing design work? Would we not?
No, we have fully appropriated the $35 million. Let's just talk police station. So we fully appropriated the $35 million. The only payments that have come out of there so far are about $33,000. And again, the rest of the phase 1 work is encumbered. And then once they get that GMP and you sign the actual contract for the construction, then, the balance of that contract will be encumbered.
You recognize Dr. Spiritus.
So I want to try and get this straight. The 34 million is the bond money?
Correct.
Okay, so how could you be spending any of the bond money when we haven't approved the bond yet?
So you have approved the issuance of it. And again, through the referendum, it has been approved. What we have not approved yet is the actual terms of the sale and the actual amount that will actually be issued. Because if this comes in at 32 million, then when we bring back the bond to issue, you'd be approving 32 million. We wouldn't be spending more than that. So right now, all of you've approved is phase 1, getting the initial work done. And then when they will bring back the balance, and then once they bring back that balance, then we'll approve actually the amount of the bonds. Because again, it's a not to exceed amount.
You recognize Dr.
No,
Spiritus.
I got to get this straight now because I'm getting confused. When bond counsel was here, we voted to permit bond counsel to go out and market the bond. Bond counsel was going to come back to us with a proposal on the bond that we were going to approve. I asked whether or not we had to approve the full amount of monies in these bonds, and they said absolutely not. They're going to come back to us with a proposal for us to approve the bond. So how could you be spending money that we haven't approved yet?
Project.
Yes, we
Okay.
approved the
We
project.
don't know what the total is that's going to be spent. What we have is the not to exceed 35, and you're absolutely right. So when we can't go out and market the bonds until we know exactly what that project is going to cost us. So that's what Mr. Bailey and the team are working on at this point out of the first $3 million. Okay. And it may come, if it comes out that, listen, this is $45 million project and you don't want to move forward with it, you're right. We will be out that $3 million, but that $3 million is still bondable. We could still go and get those dollars.
So how much do you have in the line right now?
So right now, there's 35 million, up to the 35 million to spend. But again, the council is approving it along the way. We're not spending anything the council hasn't actually approved.
Yeah, but how much did we actually approve up to this point? What was the total?
Terrence, 3.5. Yeah, that's right. That 3.5. Okay,
Go ahead, Mr. Sherman.
you good?
Go
Okay.
ahead. Thank you.
Okay, this slide, again, just a lot of public works projects. You'll see that these are some 23s, and then down at the bottom, we have a lot of 2024 projects. One thing I would point out, that whole bottom half, that are the 2024 products, those are carrying over the full budget from 2024. Those projects never got started, never got underway in 2024, so we're carrying those projects forward. And then the last of the current.
Go back.
Sure. Oops, there we go. And then these are the last of the projects that we are rolling forward. And again, other than the municipal facility one of the police when they relocated, none of these projects actually got underway in 2024. So we're rolling those balances forward.
So can you speak to, is this just a duplication that the FDEP vulnerability assessment is on both pages?
Is it on there twice?
Yeah. Yeah, it looks like.
Oh,
the
you're
same
right.
project
I'm
code.
sorry. That should only be on there once. Good catch.
But what is that anyways?
So that is so your vulnerability assessment is what you're really looking for is, let's say, storm-related issues and, what your vulnerability is in that. So that's a grant. That's an actual grant that we received to really do, again, the initial work on that. So it's not necessarily resolving any conditions that may be identified that need to be addressed. This is just to do the assessment.
I may.
Recognize.
And Chief Kurt, behind me probably. I know that there was a process that we undertook some time ago, and I think this is associated with that, looking at where generators are sited on commercial gas stations, where are there some infrastructure vulnerabilities, where are there some things that we need to work with our private sector partners to look to invariably address. So it was an overall assessment and providing for a vulnerability score. Chief Kurt, I don't know if you want to provide additional specificities with regards to that or.
Yeah, we can have the conversation. This was actually came about when we were creating the city's emergency management plan. And one of the things they look for is how vulnerable are we as a community? How many gas stations have backup generators? How many ATM machines are available in the city for individuals to be able to get cash from? How many of our homes are insured versus uninsured? How many are wood frame structure versus concrete? So all of this is part of the assessment, in addition to some of the floodplain modeling. FEMA has just changed some maps. So that's going to be encompassed in this. So it really is how vulnerable we are as a community. And it is information that is needed to move forward in that realm of emergency management, one, and two, to obtain grants. This is huge when it comes to obtaining LMS grants. So hopefully that gives you enough insight on what that assessment is.
Commissioner, Councilman McCoy, you finished? Thank you. You recognize Dr. Switters.
So, Mr. Evans, so I'm looking at your proposed budget here, and I see $500,000 for remilling. That's, in my opinion, totally ridiculous for a city this size. The Waterglades condominium, to give you an example, just opened up our bids to redo our roads and parking lot, and that alone is $500,000. This is a city of 40,000 plus people. We know we have numerous roads on Singer Island that need remilling. You have numerous roads throughout the city that needs remilling. $500,000 is not, in my opinion, is not going to go for it, and I'm not going to support it.
I'll take this one.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Recognize.
this is, if we're looking at the projects in progress, but if you go back to, I think, a couple of pages, you can see that we've upped the monies that we've set aside for milling and resurfacing. 2026 is 500,000, but then 2027, $1 million, and then it carries all the way through to 2029. I know that one of the things that's coming before the board here in short order is the analysis that we had done by our consultants that looked at the infrastructure, both the roadway as stormwater and water and sewer. And we're going to adopt the worst first methodology to effectively bring forward that as an option. Right now, our capital budget is funded with cash on hand as an agency. And so invariably, if we were to put more monies aside associated with that, there are different projects that we would have to invariably look to cannibalize. But if you can see some of the projects that are provided for roadway projects or infrastructure projects, they're $100,000 and $250,000 for Riviera Beach Shores. Then I think there's some other monies for some other roadways throughout the community. So that's what we set aside for roadways and resurfacing. But there's other monies that are going to roadway projects throughout the city. So the number is a little bit larger than that. And I would say that, yes, if in perfect scenario, I think there's opportunities to place more monies in there. And I especially think if there's an opportunity to jointly fund projects with the CRA, we can certainly do more within that particular area. But we're funding this with cash on hand, our whole entire CIP projects. And so I know that there is going to be something that we are probably going to come forward with the board to ask for additional revenues specifically to your stormwater. Right now, you do not have the capacity in your stormwater fund to fund any substantive stormwater projects. And usually when you establish a stormwater assessment, it's basically three tranches. It's operation, maintenance, and capital. Right now, you're only able to fund operation and maintenance. There's really not enough money there for the capital investment, and all these projects require investments both on most of the cases on the utility side as well as on the stormwater side. So there is a lot more conversation specific to the roadway projects and investments. And staff did submit for a Safe Streets grant, I believe. Mr. Harris? Yes, we did submit a grant that went out, I believe, today. And so Public Works and the team worked together. So we are looking to get additional monies from the state and feds associated with roadway projects, because that's something that we know is desperately needing in our community. So this is the numbers that we have this year. If their board has other projects it would like to see the funding reallocated for milling and resurfacing, we can certainly do that. But we are looking for partners on the federal side to invest in roadway construction projects.
Chair,
You're recognized, Dr. Sanders.
this is all great if we're looking into the future, and it's nice to see in 27 and 28 or whatever they have money budgeted, but I'm talking about today. And we're budgeting, we have to have enough money to do a few streets in each neighborhood for remilling in this budget. If we're going to make an impact, there should be a 5-year remilling plan or a capital plan for just the roads themselves. As you know, we've had this discussion. I'm glad that we have someone looking into the grants right now. We've been asleep at the wheel for umpteen years. I sit on the TPA board now. When I go there and I see the raise money being given out, $20 million at a pop to communities smaller than ours for their roads and streets, it's disappointing and disheartening to watch that happen and have to vote for it. Hopefully I'll be voting in favor of our projects in the future, and that we will apply for these grants as well. But right now I'm talking about today's budget. And I think that we have to, in order for the community to be satisfied that we're doing a job here, we have to start with a 5-year plan and do at least 2 streets in each neighborhood with remilling. People will see a tremendous difference and will feel a lot better if they know that every year we're doing 2 streets in their neighborhood.
If I may.
You're recognized.
Also, one of the things that you'll see that what we're doing here is we're looking to go into all of the neighborhoods to restripe a lot of our roadways. If you drive throughout our community, you can see the stop bars, and some of the roadways are in desperate need of restriping. That's a solicitation that staff is working with procurement on to release that. Also, we're looking to replace all the signage throughout our community, stop signs, street signs. One of the things that we were intentional about, especially in the capital budget, is we wanted high visibility, high value, high impact to the residents in the neighborhood. Building municipal facilities is great, but we want to better the lives of the people in the neighborhoods. And so a lot of these projects, even specifically to the FP&L street lighting design. That's an initiative that was born out of Public Works, and credit to the Public Works Director, is having an assessment looking at our street lights in our community and what improvements that we can do as a result of raising the foot candle readings in our community to make our community more walkable, safer, and the like. And it's a pretty affordable way to partner up with FP&L to make those investments. So there's a lot of things that are incorporated in this budget that are going to provide a lot of that visibility where the community can see the projects in the neighborhoods.
That's great, Jonathan, and I'm really happy that we're doing the striping, and that is something that's very visible. But when you're striping over asphalt that's deteriorated and falling apart, it doesn't make much sense. You have to fix the road and then do the striping. And I think, like I said, we have to do at least a couple of roads in each neighborhood every single year in our budget for at least the next 5 years or 10 years, above and beyond the grants that we're going to get.
If I may,
You recognize?
a couple of years ago, we did commission that analysis that's going to look at our roadway infrastructure, and so it's nearing its completion, and because we did add the utility component to it. So once that document is in fact done and that analysis is presented with the board, that is invariably going to be the roadmap that we would address the roadway infrastructure and the roadway network throughout the city. We wanted to have the document that actually supports the city's basis for making those investments, because in the past, investments were made based on, community input or persons complaining. There wasn't a methodology. This study will, in fact, provide that methodology, and I think we should have it, probably by the start of the fiscal year. And so when we do have that discussion with the board, if there is, okay, what are our options to go out to get additional capital to fund that, we certainly will do that. And we're not going to go ahead and put, investments in infrastructure that will be tearing up in the future.
So you said that road study will be at the start of the fiscal year?
Mr. Chair, if I may,
You recognize?
I believe we should have it back, by the start of this fiscal year. The last component that was outstanding was the utility element associated with it.
The reason I asked, I'll actually ask my question after, but Councilman Pro Temp, you're recognized.
Thank you. So can someone explain to me why we have gradually decreased the traffic calming capital budget after capital budget after capital budget down to $75,000? And I'm so concerned. 2.5 weeks ago, we had a traffic fatality in the 3600 block of North Congress Avenue. And I'm not sure exactly traffic calming would have addressed that issue, but I got at least 2 people that I've spoken to that have submitted petitions that have went absolutely nowhere. And ironically, both are down on the south end, one on 1st Street and one on 2nd Street. And, be true to what we said on paper. Like, how do we get this done? Because clearly, I can't sit here and wait on what we've said before that, it has to be some sort of engineering study. You know what? People die, right? I got a short block right off of Australian. If you travel from Australian and you head eastbound, there's probably 12 houses before you get to the stop sign, but people would turn the corner and they'd be doing 50 miles an hour. 34th Street, West 34th Street in the 1500 block, absolutely no sidewalks whatsoever. So when kids who actually live in that neighborhood attempt to walk to Washington Elementary, they're doing it in the road. These are the same roads that don't have traffic calming and don't have sidewalks. So I don't understand this. I can care less about a road being milled. If we have a sidewalk, that is more satisfying and gratifying for me, because kids walking in the same streets where we don't have traffic calming. So, I think it's an issue of prioritizing, and certainly, we just see this happen too much, and regrettably, right? 2019, we had a student crossing Congress Avenue who walked right into traffic early in the morning before 7:00 a.m. This time it was a little bit different, but certainly I think this is something that we have to address. And in fact, we're kind of moving in the opposite direction in terms of funding. So I would love to see that $75,000 times 14, at least $1 million. And you know what? With the exception of the roundabout circles, I don't ever recall any other traffic calming project that has been done in the city unless it's something I don't know about. But I just can't see it, Mr. Evans. We got to do better. Like, I need to know something better than that.
Mr. Chair, if I may,
You're recognized.
I'll answer, a part of the question, and then I'll defer to Mr. Bailey to get into more specificities. When we do get concerns with respect to traffic and traffic calming, we've deployed a number of different technologies. One of the things we've also done is we've incorporated the police department in the discussions, and sometimes they go out there and do traffic enforcements, or they drop the trailer, or there's a situation where in some neighborhoods we've actually have the automated speed signs that actually capture, thank you, Mr. Bailey, that actually capture the speed in which vehicles traverse through the neighborhoods. And so we have looked at it holistically from multiple perspectives, and the physical infrastructure part is the last part of the process. But there is a level of analysis that is done before we go out there and we put a speed bump in a neighborhood, and it is a process that involves Public Works, PD, and the like, to identify if in fact is it somebody just crossing through the neighborhood, or is it a situation where there is a bona fide issue. And so, Mr. Bailey, if you want to talk about the process and some of the things that from a standard of review that you go through from an engineering perspective.
Sure. First point, the $75,000 that you're referring to labeled as traffic calming, that facilitates the traffic calming process that we have up on the Public Works website. There's an application where residents can petition the city for a traffic calming item. It may be a stop sign, it may be a speed bump. We get a number of different types of requests. So that line is to fund that sort of request-based function here for the city. So we haven't spent, I don't believe, much money out of there in the last few years, in that we haven't really received the number of requests. When we do get a request, most of the ones that I've seen in the last 5 years say, speeding on my road, and they'll give us an address. Well, those type of traffic calming requests go to PD, because that's an enforcement issue, right? If there's excessive speeding on a road in front of a house, that's transferred to PD. They do enforcement, and we first look at it, enforcement measures to, as Mr. Evans said, is it just passers through? Is it not residents? What can be done in the way of providing enforcement in that section of road? So the applications that say, I would like a speed bump in front of my house, that goes through a different process. Again, first we go to enforcement to determine if there's a real issue, and it's not necessarily anecdotal.
I reclaim my time. Mr. Bailey, stop, please.
Okay.
Please. I want traffic. I want speed bumps. I don't give a darn about the police department. They can't be at every single corner, and I'm not looking for them to do an assessment anytime somebody calls. In fact, I don't know what that's not traffic calming. When I'm referring to traffic calming, I'm talking about speed bumps. Okay, you got the radars up there that are, I know I've seen some over on West 9th Street. Okay, perfect. But how do I get speed bumps on a street that doesn't have sidewalks? That's what I'm talking about. I'm not interested in all that other stuff, and it's becoming painful to hear people that can't even give you a direct answer. I got 2 people that I know of that have lost their lives. We can't legislate morality and tell people how to drive. For instance, in the 3600 block of North Congress, folks, in fact, wait a minute, Mr. Evans, if you can recall, I sent you a video, and Mr. Travieso, this is probably news to you, but I was exiting my community and there was such a delay. I was trying to figure out why it took so long for me to get on the Congress Avenue, when I recognized it was a good company's trash hauling truck that chose to make an illegal left turn. Now, here's what I'm looking for when I say traffic calming. Obviously, despite there being a right turn only sign, had there been some plastic poles or posts that actually prevented a person from actually turning left bound, that would have been perfect, because that same traffic poles would have prevented this person from dying about 2.5 weeks ago, the night before school, when nobody in the community could get in for 6 hours. It's like, that's the kind of stuff that I don't want to have to go to the police department to talk about. From an engineering standpoint, clearly, if there's no left turns, there should be something more than the sign. There should be some sort of barriers that prevents a person from actually turning left. There should be some sort of directional cones or markers that actually make it where you cannot go anywhere but the way that it's intended. And that was the most devastating thing, Mr. Evans, when I sent you guys that video, only for August 11th to happen, where a resident who was in a rush thought they could make the left turn and got T-boned and succumbed to his injuries on scene. And it's on video. And the worst part of it is when it's on video, and it's all over the internet. Right. So like, this is what I'm talking about. Those are simple fixes that I don't want to have to go to the police department. You know, I know we've done some great things with putting flashers on top of stop signs to try to reinforce in those new areas where we're placing stop signs. That's great. But it's the small things like that I think really are nominal in cost, but they really save a life. Like, what does it take to get those kind of things? I mean, I'm even seeing speed humps that can actually be installed with Tapcon screws, and you drill down into without having actual, to come out and construct, harmonizing a real speed hump and going through the whole engineering phase. Like, this is the kind of stuff that I would hope that we can put in the interim until we can be able to address the larger issues of, trying to do an analysis or engineering of a street. Like, that's what I'm hoping for. How do we get there, please? And I'm not interested in the police department, because I can tell you, they have their own. Matter of fact, I'm not interested in the police department trying to concern themselves with speeders. I mean, let's try to figure out on the proactive end how we can deter it all together, as opposed to the enforcement part.
You're recognized.
We can certainly increase the monies associated with traffic calming devices and the signage that we've deployed throughout the city. The signage was a different or a variation of traffic calming as well. And I can tell you, for every speed bump that you put in the neighborhood, you get equally the same amount of calls for placing that speed bump there. And so the process does involve some conversations with the people in that particular area, because we have installed speed bumps where we do get complaints about persons saying the noise that somebody makes when they hit the speed bump wakes them up, and they send me their Ring camera video from 3 o'clock to 7 o'clock in the morning. And so we can definitely put some more monies in there. We can definitely identify those areas that are problem areas to address the concern that Councilperson McCoy say. But we can look to set aside additional monies and try to find a way that is a delicate balance, that we address the public safety issue, but also the concerns that the neighbors may have as a result of having the speed bump in close proximity to their home and the like. And so we can bring back a different number in there.
You recognize Dr. Spiritus.
So, Mr. Evans, I concur 100% with my colleague, Councilman McCoy, with the traffic calming devices. There are numerous grants out there, and hopefully our grants person will look at these highway grants that exist for calming, speeding, and safety with respect to the roads. But I think that we have to really rethink this budget. I think you need at least $1 million in there for this year. Hopefully we can get state and federal grants for the future years, but we have to think about today and not tomorrow right now when it comes to something like this. The same thing with the remilling. I hate to keep going back to that, but when you have someone buy a house for $12 million and they're spending $300,000 a year in taxes, and they come out of their driveway and the road is totally falling apart because the last time it was done was in 1970, that's not acceptable. We have to budget for this, and we have to show the people that we understand, and at least we're starting the process. Clearly, we can't do every road in the city in 1 year, but we have to be able to do a couple of roads or a few roads in each neighborhood to show them that we understand the issue, and you're just part of the plan, and eventually we're going to get to you. But the calming as well, I think you have to put at least $1 million in there for that. Everywhere I go in the city, I always get a calming complaint from the community, whether it be the neighborhood associations or individuals, but I get that constantly from Military Trail all the way to North Ocean. So I think it's something that we got to really rethink.
If I may.
You're recognized.
If it is the board's pleasure, and I'd have to defer to Mr. Chairman, if you were to look to increase those specific line items to the tune of $1 million in each of those, invariably you'd have to wipe out probably about 40 to 50% of your capital projects, because the capital budget is only roughly about 4.5 million in totality. I will tell you though, the deployment of speed bumps is you just push the traffic elsewhere. And so that's why PD's involved, is we're trying to address the problem versus the symptom. And I can tell you that when we do deploy those, especially the ones that are, with the Tapcon screws, the rubber ones that are in there, those ones make a significant amount of noise. And even the some other, Mr. Bailey, what is the other striping that we utilized that we had?
Rumble strips.
The rumble strips. We got a lot of flack when we deployed the rumble strips throughout the neighborhoods and communities. So, that's why we do have the discussion, because it's the person that lives in front of that house or across the street from that area that are the ones that complain about the speed bump. And so we don't want to deploy something that becomes problematic. And so we can find a delicate balance, but if the board's desire is to put in that much money into those, we would have to, pull away, some monies from some of the projects that are currently on the CIP. Yeah, we can
You're
go back
recognized,
in.
Mr. Peters.
Okay, Mr. Evans, it's not just speed bumps that we're talking about. In calming traffic, there are numerous devices that we can use to calm the traffic. So it's not always speed bumps. It could be the signage, the digital signs. It could be, plastic posts, as Councilman McCoy said, to keep cars from making a left-hand turn where they're not supposed to. There are numerous things that we need that calming for, and we should be doing that throughout the entire city, because we're talking about life and death issues, not just aesthetic issues.
You're recognized, sir.
And certainly we can go back and we can put some additional monies in those two specific line items and look at the projects. But I will tell you the biggest bang for your buck is the $250 coupon that you get from the police department when you are speeding through local roadways. That's the biggest deterrent that we have. And so, I would obviously say that coupling that with additional speed enforcement and any other resources that PD may need, and I'll get with the chief to do that would also, because we have to take it from multiple angles, but we can certainly look to bring additional monies to both of those line items if it's the pleasure of the board.
You're recognized.
I just have a problem. We know that we're going to go for grants, and we've had this discussion before, and you understand this. I just want to bring this out to the open so the other board members can hear what we were discussing. And we both know that shovel-ready projects are the ones that get to the top of the list, whether it be state or federal grants that we're going for. So do we have like a line item in here for, let's say, $1 million, $1.5 million for design of projects, so that we could be ready to go for the big $20, $30 million from the state and the feds?
If I may.
You're recognized, sir.
Some of the projects that you have in here, some of your capital projects it is the design money to effectively move forward with those projects. So you'll see, for instance, this not on this particular page, but there is one of our pages where you'll see that there is some of that is design money associated with that, because to your point, in order to get the allocations from the feds or the state, the projects have to be shovel ready. And so there is monies that are anticipated and contemplated, because a linear mile right now, Mr. Bailey, is costing what's
10 million a mile.
so it's so expensive now for roadway projects that most of the monies, unless it's a small neighborhood or small community, the monies that have been appropriated is the design money to invariably move it to the next step to go and receive those funds that you've spoken about, Councilperson.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Pro Tem.
So I know we recognize there's some duplications on there that may
Yeah,
have been typos, but since you got this page up, what's the National Village 175?
Bailey, if you want to talk on that one.
Sir, as you know, the Lake in National Village has an issue. I believe you've met us out there a few times with concerns from the residents. The staff has been working diligently to try to resolve that issue. So that's funding for a potential solution and assistance to National Village to address that retention problem that they have.
Good. Thank you.
Mr. Evans, I see that we have, I know you mentioned the signage, neighborhood signage, rebranding, 800,000 allocated for that. What exactly is that? Because I know you said you were going to be addressing signage and striping and whatnot, but what is the neighborhood rebranding? That's 800K.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
You recognize?
That's the repair and construction of the neighborhood signs throughout the city. Some of the design money, some of the construction money for some of those marquee signs that are present in the neighborhood.
Okay, so that's just the neighborhood signs that'll be repaired?
Mr. Chair,
You recognize?
I believe that, yeah, those are just the main monument signs and the entry signs, the monument signs and the entry signs.
There one night when the front entry at 95 got demolished, so, and a few of them. All righty.
See.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so we focus on the bottom half of this slide, starting with first the fire bunker gear. Obviously, every so many years, we need to replace the gear for the firefighters. But then the next 4 lines and the top line on the next screen, top 2 lines on the next page, these are all replacements for the fire apparatus. We've pushed those out, a couple of things in this. So we've had to push those out to the future years because the lead time is so long. So if fire puts in an order now, they may not see that apparatus for 2, 3, 4 years down the line. So at some point, fire department will be coming to you to ask to be able to place those orders, even though the funding and the payments won't be coming again out till 26, 27, 28, whatever year ultimately comes. The thing I would point out on this, and this is something we can talk about, right now I'm trying to fund these through using the cash. I'm listening to the conversations that we're having. And this may be a good opportunity to enter into some capital leases. When we did this back in 2012, 2013, and replaced all of the apparatus that was long past its life at that point, we did do some capital leases. All those capital leases are coming to an end. So if there's some interest in maybe freeing up some capital cash to be able to do some of these other projects that we're talking about, these items here, we certainly would be eligible for a capital lease if there was interest in going in that route. We do have debt capacity in that regard, so that's not an issue for us. And the last time I want to say the interest rates were around 3%. And we all know 2012 is not the same as 2024, but these are something we would do in some 5-year capital leases. So we could look at that if that's of interest. So what the fire department is asking for, they have 1 ladder on here, excuse me, 2 engines, and actually 3 rescue units. So there's one on the bottom of that page.
Chief Curd, if you can kind of share with the board, obviously the state of what's happening concerning your fire apparatus, because I think it's important that we have some concerns and even the conditions of the existing fleet and what we just experienced concerning the reliability of our fleet, because I think that this is a very pressing issue that at some point, to Mr. Sherman's point, that we may have to move some of this up. And in fact, as Mr. Sherman talked about, get into some of the capital leases, Chief.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Evans. As it relates to the apparatus, we don't necessarily look at how many miles are on the apparatus. We look at engine hours because many of the times our apparatus are idling. And the formula that's used is for every 1 hour of idle time, it's equivalent to 30 miles of road wear or the equivalent. These apparatus that we're talking about, the engines currently are all at about 250 to 300,000 miles. While they look good, our firefighters do a great job of waxing, polishing. It's the guts, it's the transmissions, it's the pumps, it's the rear ends, it's the turbos. Those types of things are an issue. We're looking to move sooner rather than later, simply because of the lead time. It's somewhere around 36 to 48 months when you order an apparatus to receive that apparatus. Also, what we want to do is lock in the pricing. When we bought our first apparatus in 2015, it was $477,000. In 2018, it jumped to $521,000. Today's dollars, that apparatus, the same one that we saw in 2015 at $500,000, is now $957,000. That's what the COVID escalation has done. We've seen numbers just absolutely escalate, and we look to lock these in. With the rescue trucks, we do have a great program in place where we're not actually having to purchase the rescue truck. We're doing what's known as a remount. We designed our apparatus originally, so basically they lift off the ambulance box, they slide out the chassis, they put a new chassis underneath it, and we're saving upwards of 40% from having to buy a new apparatus versus a remount, which is practically a rebuild of the apparatus, but at a fraction of the cost. So these are some of the things that we're looking to do over the next 5 years. Again, some of this may have to be moved up. I think to Mr. Evans's point, we deployed to assist the state of Florida, called for assistance for Hurricane Debbie. I came across the Big Bend area in Florida. We sent up a unit. When that unit arrived to its destination, it broke down. We sent a second unit up there to replace it. En route, that unit broke down. We don't even have units that can make it to Tallahassee and back. So we really need to move aggressively on some of these, but again, spread them out because we can't send all of our apparatus out for remount at one time. I need backup in place to run calls, so we can only do those one at a time. When one comes back, we can then send another. So hopefully that provides some clarity to the apparatus remount and purchase program.
Recognized.
Chief, did you say it takes 3 years to order a truck, to have a truck manufactured?
3 to 4 years for an engine,
Right.
2 to 3 years for an aerial truck. Yes, sir.
Right, and how much do you have to put down
Nothing.
to get it started? Nothing?
Not until there's no monies required until we actually receive delivery of the vehicle. But we lock in the pricing at the time we order.
Devin, shouldn't we be doing that right now?
Mr. Chair,
Recognized.
that's part of the discussion that we're having with the board, because what we want to do is bring you an item here probably in the next couple of city council meetings. I think the chief has already drafted the item to ask for authorization to place the order now. And it is such a competitive environment that basically the reason that they're asking for no money down is that if you don't want the truck, there's so many people that want the same apparatus. And so that's one of the items that we're going to be asking for the board to give us authorization so we can proceed forward with the ordering process.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mr. Evans. That was very useful. Thank you.
Councilman.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief, I don't think you ever heard me say this before, but I'd like to know what our collections are looking like.
Our collections, we have always had issues with our collections simply because of the number of uninsured. We have one of the highest uninsured rates in Palm Beach County. But with the revision to our contract with Palm Beach Shores and our collection rates being up around 68 to 70% is about where we're hovering as it relates to our collections. But what we have been able to do is we've actually been able to partner with the state and the federal government on a subsidies program for our Medicare and Medicaid patients, which is bringing in about $500,000 to $750,000 a year in additional revenue, because simply what Medicare and Medicaid reimburses us doesn't even cover the cost of the equipment used on the call, much less everything else associated with it. So we've been fortunate in that way.
Thank you, Chief. Actually, I ask that question every year, if you can recall. I'm just trying to figure out, I see so many people that, well, I don't see them, but I know that there's many people that use our ambulance service to get to hospitals as a result of traffic accidents and what have you, and then they walk away with a $150,000 settlement, and I know there's ways to subrogate in place, and I've seen it, right? I've seen agencies and even fire departments actually make claims against and file liens against folks' judgments. And I just want to make sure that, if we're deploying assets, I don't know if I shared this with you, but I was riding one night and I seen a particular individual who was standing on the corner, and I seen an ambulance pull up, and I was like, let me see what's going on. So I stopped, and then your paramedics got out of the truck and said, not again. We just took you to the hospital 3 hours ago. And I'm like, so wait, you stopped and called the ambulance to take you back to the hospital, and you were staying at PBOH in Blue Heron. And I know there's a lot of abuse, and sometimes people don't need it. They even need a ride. I literally thought that was the wildest thing for me. I don't know that you can do anything about that, because we still have to provide service if someone needs assistance. But to that point, right, I just don't think that we need to not be serious about collecting. Well, I'm not saying that you aren't serious about collecting, but I think we need to be more vigilant about collecting. In fact, the legislature changed laws in 2022 legislative session, actually 22 and 23, regarding individuals that owe money. I mean, you literally can place liens on folks' licenses. And I'm not saying that we go there, but I just think we need to be a little more vigilant in making sure that if folks owe us money, if they're unable to pay, I totally get it. But I just don't want to find out somebody's riding around, in a brand new car after, some injury that they suffered, but we never got paid for the services that we got. And I know you have your staff, and there's also a collection process that's involved. But I really like to believe that I've seen it in court pleadings that there are agencies that actually go after people who have liens. In Miami-Dade County is one, for example. They will actually record an official lien in because Miami-Dade County, Jackson Hospital will record a lien if you use their services and you don't have the monies. They literally will do that. And I thought that was the wildest thing. And they said that that's customary. So I'm not saying that we do that. We just need to be vigilant in collecting, because we get to these situations where we can't even, you said it yourself, almost it's embarrassing, right? And I thought it was interesting, right? When we go to the Capitol and we go up there for Palm Beach County Days, and then I know there was another time I went up there and it was firefighters and paramedics week. I seen many agencies represented and I didn't see ours, and it's sad to say, if you telling me in our meeting, our one of our engines or one of our pieces of equipment won't make it to Tallahassee. That's really unfortunate. But I would like to see that we're doing more in terms of collecting. So however you can, strengthen that, that'd be great for the
Yes,
organization.
and I do want to let you know that the last time we had this conversation, I heard you. We spoke with our collections agency, and one of the things we're working on is updating our medical patient care reporting system so we can process our claims faster, submit to the insurance companies so we can get in line first to receive some of those funds. That was one of the issues that we were dealing with that we're resolving right now with our providers. So I did hear you, and we are working on that.
Thank you, Chief.
Yes,
Appreciate
sir.
it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Pro Tem. You want to continue, Mr. Chairman? Thank you.
The balance of this page, we're trying to really hit on a lot of our facilities that are in need. So we have Ocean Rescue. That building over there is in need of some facelift. We have temporary 86, which the council approved last year, so we can demo Station 86. So we've got that $1 million to do that retrofit on the building we will be leasing. Police technology, that's really their cameras. So we try to fund that every year. That is actually an increase over prior years. Again, cost escalations. And then when at the bottom there, we have the Lindsay Davis improvements, some funds in there for parks admin to move off the Barracuda Bay site. And then we do need to move the server room out of City Hall before City Hall at some point in the future here is demolished and replaced. We have anticipated library roof replacement out 3 years. And again, over at the library, we're looking at putting a digital sign similar to the one that we have on Blue Heron at City Hall. The total package that we have here again, we do have, if you look on the far right on the top line, this is really a 5-year, $179 million capital program.
Yeah,
Pro Tem McCoy, you're recognized.
thank you. Mr. Sherman, you're pretty good with clicking that thing real fast. So let's talk about the library.
Okay.
You know, I know we had this conversation. The library isn't, for us, not even just barely over 3 years old, if that much. When we purchased that building, was there not an assessment or did we not do an inspection or have an appraisal of the property prior to us closing on that? Because, I mean, it seems pretty darn quick to have to replace the library after 5 years. And I know we poured millions of dollars into retrofitting that to be a library. Like, we're talking about a whole entire roof, and $500,000 doesn't even seem nearly enough to even fix a roof at the library.
Yes, Terrence Bailey. When we purchased that building 5 or 6 years ago, there was an evaluation done. We knew the length of time. Generally, there were no issues, but as you know, it's been 5 years. We did mainly the project at the library was an interior renovation. We didn't address the roof, knowing that at the time we needed to advance that project very quickly. You can also see that the roof is another 3 years out from the budget. So we've had a few issues and patched the roof of the library, and we're anticipating a re-roof in that third year as anticipated. So we want to get it. We became aware of the issue, and we want to make sure it is funded in its appropriate time before the roof at the library becomes a very problematic issue.
Thank you. I just kind of surprised to see that already. And we did get that 5 years ago. We got that since we've been on the board. I think we demoed our former library in 2020, 2021. We started in 19, and certainly they were there then. Thank you.
Councilman Spirit, is your recognized.
Mr. Evans, the $1 million for the temporary 86 retrofit, don't we have money in the bond to handle that?
Mr. Chair,
You're recognized.
we invariably, if we were to utilize the bond proceeds from that, it would take away from that project, because I think we're going to be towing the line with respect to the cost for Fire Station 86. In addition to, I don't know, Mr. Sherman, from the proceeds, could you use that for a temporary facility?
I don't know. I guess we can certainly take a look at that. As you know, under the bond resolution, we are allowed to reimburse ourselves for prior costs, but there would have to be bond proceeds remaining, to reimburse yourself for that. But we certainly can take a look at that. And then I think to the point where you're probably going is then that frees up money that we can put into asphalt or something somewhere else. So we can take a look at that. The key issue is when we get that GMP on 86 to really see where, if there will be funds available, but we'll look. This slide here, again, this is right now how we anticipate financing this program. Obviously, the big one at the top is that sales tax. That's for that city hall. That's that $25 million we talked about. And then the capital financing, that's the balance of the 2021 bonds and then the referendum bonds. I would point out too that we do have for 87 anticipated using some of the major disaster funds to harden 87. So we'll be justifying that transfer as that project comes to a close. And then again, I'll point out the CIP line. We put $4 million a year in. So that's why you're trying to, we're trying to carry that line across. And you can see as we get out to 28, 29, just, we may have to push some projects out there as there's some capacity out in those future years. So as we go back and we look to see if we can, move some things around to try to get more funding for milling and resurfacing and traffic calming, we may have to push a project out to the right. But that's the breakdown as we see it at this point for these capital projects. And so before I move to the utility district, is there any further questions on the general fund projects? No? Okay. All right, going into the 5-year capital improvement plan for USD. Again, you see these projects here on this first page. You notice they're all 2018 projects. That's how long some of these projects have been out there. These really, for the most part, relate back to the 2016 debt issuance that we had 8 years ago. But these projects, again, some of these are encumbered. Some of them are just unspent dollars at this point. Talking to the prior executive director, it was, let's just hold these. Because again, as they were going through trying to match the projects up, they weren't sure whether they could close these projects or if funds were actually needed. So that actually goes for the first couple of slides. Notice down the bottom, that's really the big one, the intercoastal water main. Right now, we have appropriated $7.8 million. And what we've been told is that we need another $4.3 million in 2025 to make that project a fully funded project.
You recognize.
Mr. Sherman, I see that you have 364 for the intercoastal water main on the first page. And then I see get it together.
They're
to make
they're
one?
both available for the same project, but as you notice, that was the original appropriation that we had. And again, that goes all the way back to 2018. That's how long this project has been on the plan. So yeah, that 3 is available there. And then what we did in 2023, we appropriated the additional 7, 8, and now they still believe they need.
Chair?
You recognize.
Okay, so Mr. Evans, have we designed this project?
You recognize. You recognize.
If I may, we are working on the design associated with that project. I'm pretty sure that we're close to where this should be available to go out for bid here in the next little. I think they're doing some additional surveys and some of the capital projects. I'm still getting briefed and some additional information from staff with regards to that. And by the first reading of your budget, I'll be able to, provide a little bit more specificities on these capital projects. But I'm quite sure that we're making pretty good progress on that. The biggest thing that we've seen associated with this project is where we are going to lay the pipe and invariably the directional boards. And that's been the challenge. I know they've spoken with private property owners as well as the Coast Guard. And so there was a lot of back and forth, but we can provide additional a little bit more specificities on these projects here in the next little bit.
You recognize.
So, Mr. Evans, you and I had a discussion. I just want to get this out in the open. Are these going to be redundant lines?
Mr. Chair, if I may. The lines that will be constructed would be new lines, and then invariably we would come back and we would make improvements to the older lines to have the redundancies built into the system.
So if one line were to fail, the island would not lose water or sewer.
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. That's very good to hear. Thank you so much.
Go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
So you will notice that most of these projects are either 18, which related to the old bond issue, or 2023, which is when we had a change in the executive director. He actually came in and put together these plans that have carried forward. And again, we're trying to certain things like lift station rehab, canal crossings, raw water wells improvement, trying to fund those projects and get funding out there every year. The item on the bottom, the new water treatment plant, based on the meeting that we had last week, I did put in that $250 million item, which gets that project now up to that 360. I think they were at 356 or something like that last week. So I have increased that number to match the presentation that we did receive last Thursday. Again, I've got these projects here that came on. The top two are from 2023. Those are two $500,000. I believe both of those are grants. Which is why they're separate from, you see, the new water treatment plant. That's a grant. That's why it's a separate line item. But again, you've got these, projects that are out there. There's funding associated with all these. I think the problem that, we continue to have, and, I think you heard it last week too, it's just a matter of getting these projects out the door and getting them done. Again, on this slide here, again, it just continues, so some 18 projects, a lot of 23 projects. We're looking to close out all of those 18s eventually. But again, we're trying to continually fund the projects. I think you heard last week with the wells, get the wells fixed. So we're trying to make sure there's funding in here every year for some of these, more repetitive type items. Again, these are, same type of thing. They're just the standard projects that we continually run into. I will point out again, the water meter replacement. Again, we do have dollars in every year. I know we talked about, just go off script a little bit here. We know we talked about trying to replace the meters in that one area of the city where it appeared that we had a bad batch and they were kind of all going off at the same time. We have seen a couple other areas where we're seeing a number of meters that we're starting to lose, and that project is six years, those meters, and we shouldn't be having that. So again, we're not paying for the replacement meters. It's a matter of pulling them out, turning them in, getting replacement meters back. So again, it's that process of changing. This is actually for new meters.
You recognize?
I had a resident come to me from Lakeview Park just a few days ago to tell me that they checked her water meter out and said the water meter was not accurate, and they just left it the way it was, and she has not been paying for water for over a year, and no one's come to talk to her about the water meter.
I don't think you need to say anymore. Because surprisingly, they're gonna make it almost impossible for her to pay that bill. I've been dealing with two people already. You might not want to say that on the record, sir. Yeah, because I tell you, our finance guy, they're tough. They can't even give you a formula how they calculate compound interest monthly. So I would tell you to take it offline, Commissioner Spiritus. Because no, don't do it online.
If you could, yeah, we'll talk, because I'm not aware of that. And I will point out, we spoke earlier about all the road projects. The utility district does budget for road projects. So again, we're trying to put in, again, $2 million a year to do the below ground work when we're touching the streets. One of the things is if we're doing milling and resurfacing, that's not reconstruction, and we're not using these dollars for that. But to the point the city manager made earlier, the stormwater program has no capital dollars, and that will have to be addressed. I think we talked about it last year during the budget cycle too, but that will ultimately have to be addressed once we get back into the reconstruction mode.
Chair.
Recognize.
So I'm still trying to find out, how do we charge 8% interest on stormwater when I don't see that in our code? I sent that to you by email twice. Perhaps you figured it out yet, Mr. Sherman, or should I give you more time? Maybe 2 weeks sounds good. I think that's kind of the going rate to get information back from staff. I just want to put that on the record that we're charging people interest and it's not even justified in our code. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
So again, this is how we see that the USD capital projects will be funded. And again, as we talked about last week, about $400 million of this $500 million capital plan will need to be financed. You can see that we do use the impact fees. We do annually fund the renewal and replacement account. But again, the need here is far exceeding what we have as far as, again, pay-as-you-go type capital. So we'll be looking to finance about $400 million of this over the next couple of years. And that's those are the projects for the utility special district.
Recognize Dr. Fayers.
Evans or Mr. Sherman, I don't know who's going to answer this, but the citywide infrastructure, road infrastructure project, can that be used for stormwater repairs?
Mr. Chair, since we have a special revenue fund and it's an enterprise fund, we can only utilize that for utility-related services. If we were to do any stormwater improvements, invariably it would have to be funded out of the stormwater, or you would have to utilize general revenue. You couldn't do it out of your enterprise fund here on the utility district side. So in essence, if the city did if there was capital that needed to be brought on behalf of stormwater, it would be something that would be funded out of general revenue.
Recognize.
Mr. Evans, you need this full amount of money in the infrastructure. You can't take part of this money and put it into the stormwater?
Chair, if I may. I could not use the utility district monies to do that. I could utilize funding that's available in the city's capital budget, but not out of the utility district. So if there was monies that we brought to the table, it would be out of the city's capital budget, not out of the utility district to fulfill the obligation that the stormwater fund would have on a capital project.
But one more question before we're finished, and I don't know who's going to answer this question, probably you, Mr. Evans. We were doing an I&I study. Can you tell me if the study is done? Do we have the results of that study yet?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Recognize.
That's the study that I referenced earlier that I hope to get in hand by the first part of October, but it's at the final stages. Mr. Chair, if I may.
Recognize.
We could use the stormwater and the asphalt component are done associated with that particular project. And so with the budget being adopted on September 30th and going into effect October 1, I'm hopeful that we would be able to have that study. And as a result of that study, if priorities need to shift in the capital budget based on that study, that would be something that I would have to bring back to the board for your consideration. And we're going to present the findings of the study from that to the board anyway as part of the project, and then ask for direction if there's any modifications to the budget you'd like to see as a result of the study. Yes, sir. So, yep. So, Mr. Chair, members of the board, one of the things that we discussed earlier is that that takes us through the capital budget part of the presentation. As it relates to the budget discussion, I know that there's a lot of documents and a lot of information that are contained in the packets that were received, and so it would be staff's recommendation if the board wanted to get into the more robust discussion at your meeting on the 5th, which is the first reading of the budget. That gives you some time to comb through the information, to get any additional questions that you may have from staff. The staff is prepared if you would like to go through some of the other nuances associated with the budget, but given that it is a pretty lengthy PowerPoint, I think 129 slides, it's whatever the board's pleasure is, and staff is prepared to handle it any way the board wishes to.
Board members? September 5th is fine for Ms. Miller Anderson? She said September 5th would be fine to go over some additional.
That's okay with me too.
Okay. The only thing I wanted to add, Mr. Evans, is we spoke about the 250 for the READ program, the community grant program, possibly looking at some additional funding, assistance with the PAL program, and putting a budget in there for PAL. And those were the only concerns that I had off top of tonight, in addition to the capital budget. Because I know we presented the READ tonight, so that was something I was looking into. So anything else we can address moving forward? Councilman McCoy,
Yes.
pro
so-
temp, you recognize.
We talked briefly about positions at the previous budget meeting. Are we going to revisit that on the 5th?
If I may?
Recognize.
Yes, councilperson, we're going to revisit all that on the 5th.
Okay, I would like to mirror the comments from the chairperson regarding PAL and a couple other, I guess I'll wait, but I have a couple other concerns regarding. So Chair, did you elaborate on the fund that you were speaking of?
The community grant program or
Yes.
the READ program? Well, coming up with I know that by next week it's gonna be difficult to come out with a full vetted program for it. And I know you asked for 250, but I want some nonprofit dollars. So we didn't elaborate too much into it, but having a plan, the process, how to account for the budget, how to allocate those funds is gonna be difficult to come up by next week. But I do want to see those funds before we allocate any of them created. And then also a timeline on that, how quickly we'll get them out. Because if we tell the community and nonprofit organizations we have funds available, but then we take 6 months to create a program, I think it's going to be counterproductive to having those dollars allocated. Good. Councilman, you're recognized.
Yes, sir. The discretionary dollar, however you want to call it. But I guess my concern, Mr. Evans, is, your counterpart over at the CRA, we talked about this at our budget meeting. These days are starting to run together now, because it seemed like we this is the third time this week, but the homelessness problem, as you know, Mr. Evans, has gotten out of control, right? And Avenue C, the roadside parking has become, and I don't think that there's anything that police needs to be concerned with, but at any time you can see people that are actually, for instance, when we leave a board meeting, if it's one of those late evenings and you pass by that way, just to the west of Bicentennial Park, along those parking spaces there are people that's actually sleeping in their vehicles. And we see it down Broadway. To that point, I want to revive the conversation that we had about Riviera Cares. Let's try to, this is the Riviera Beach Cares program that was really doing a lot of great work in terms of helping those that were displaced for some short-term programming. I see a lot, Chief, and I know this has been my concern, and I hate to seem like I say this stuff and say it and then nothing happens until something happens. Like I used to talk about Wawa all the time, and then we had a shooting inside of Wawa, and just as equally as bad as the motel that's right next door. And I'm like, looking at the amount of foot traffic and people that's using drugs and drinking, and I'm like, I would love to see if that obviously this is very hypothetical in thinking, and I certainly am not proposing this, but to have a place like that with that many rooms, and we have this kind of homelessness of people who are working class folks who just can't afford decent and adequate housing. I would love to have a hotel where we can help transition these people into some sort of stable and long-term housing plan, as opposed to what appears to be a cesspool of people that are just drinking and using drugs, and it's just like a revolving clock back and forth to the Wawa all day and night long. And I'm just like, this is unbelievable. And I know this takes a lot on police, but they're doing they're doing as best as they can, considering you can't have a cop on every corner. So I definitely ride and I see this. So I want to see how we can address that issue in terms of helping out with some of these programs for nonprofit funding for potentially those that are genuinely displaced. And I'm not talking about folks that want to be on the streets, but I would like to see if we can revisit that. That's it in terms of budget. I do have a couple other concerns I want to address generally, Mr. Chair.
Real quick for the record, you said that the road study should be done by the beginning of the fiscal year?
Mr. Chair, can you repeat what you said?
The road study that is being completed, we're going to have that done by the beginning of the fiscal year?
Mr. Chair, I believe that'll be complete by the start of the fiscal year.
Okay, and I know on the CRA side, we're looking to couple some of the money with the city to do some road improvements, and especially in our different neighborhoods. So seeing the worst to first that we can kind of get to work on. And like my colleague said, just making sure we're addressing multiple roads in multiple neighborhoods every year versus just kind of doing one-offs. Additional comments in regards to the budget?
I had a question about
Go
the nonprofit. Are you talking about the $250,000 for the education, or are you talking about separate funds for that
Additional funds. 'Cause I know Mr. Evans wanted to allocate those specifically for the
READ program?
READ program. So I was looking at additional funds for some type of nonprofit funding, like what my colleague, Councilman McCoy, pro temp did address, some type of funding to go there. Definitely also some funding for PAL, and then some of the nonprofit organizations that have been asking for support. Yes, ma'am. Good. Go ahead, Dr. Spitters.
Our closing
Oh,
comments now,
we're
or-
actually there now. So, Mr. Evans, any closing comments for the board?
No, Mr. Chair, we've been taking notes with respect to some of the items that the board has articulated concerning the capital projects. And so we'll make appropriate modifications, and then we'll have a more robust discussion on the other elements associated with the board at your September 5th meeting.
Perfect. Dr. Spitters, you're up. Thank you.
Chair, as you know, our Economic Development Director will be leaving on the 9th, and I would like to take this time to thank her for her service to our city, and hopefully someday she'll come back and serve us again. Thank you.
Councilman McCoy, you're up.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Mr. Evans, Mr. Travier, so on Tuesday, the 27th, about 1 a.m. in the morning, I was traveling east on I'm sorry, that's the time of day I can actually get work done. I can tell you, I take a lot of calls during the day, and I try to be responsive. Yeah, and if you didn't know, if you recall, we had a study done that shows I represent almost half of the city in constituents. So I try to make it a point that I'm involved personally, or I try to navigate them. So if you got any extra resources over in District 2, you can send them over to District 1, and we can figure out how to deploy those. Thank you, colleague. Seriously, safety is very important, Mr. Evans and Mr. Travier. So I'm not sure, actually, it probably would be, well, actually, it should include you, but whoever the firm is that's responsible for doing the wastewater and manholes clean outs, they're literally out at 1 o'clock in the morning with no MOT whatsoever. And I literally pulled up on this with a bunch of cones, and it's by the time you arrive up on it, it's almost too late. And I'm thinking to myself, I thought we made it a point, and I know I addressed this with the previous public works director, is how do we have folks that's out doing this level of work at 1 o'clock in the morning with heavy equipment, clearly we have a noise ordinance, and they're down here doing jetted cleaning out of manholes and that sort of thing. And they had Broadway and Blue Heron completely closed. Well, they had one lane in both directions completely closed off. And this was an issue for traffic because when you got to the intersection, folks didn't know which lane to transition or merge into in order to either travel north or south on US 1. And that lasted for at least 4 hours. And I was just so shocked. And I'm like, why are they out doing this kind of work at night in the first place? You know, I know couple years back, I was traveling up Congress, 8 o'clock at night, someone's there pressure washing the monument signs. I mean, how is this okay? Seemingly, right? When we allow this kind of work, there has to be some sort of restrictions on the time of day because this creates noise, and our code specifically prohibit doing certain types of activities, you know, after 7 p.m. And the contractor was certainly there to the point that I even informed the watch commander that night, and he was aware of it. And he had, you know, said, well, at a minimum, there should have been some sort of detail or better direction of how traffic flows because God forbid if someone comes through there. And first of all, I want to know, is that typical that they go out and clean manholes at night?
Mr. Chair, if I may,
You recognize?
I'm not aware of a situation where they would do that at night or in the evening. Mr. Bailey.
I believe that's actually the INS study we've been discussing. Because Blue Heron and Broadway have such high traffic volumes, the only time that they can really do that type of work intensely is at night. That does not excuse any deficiencies in an MOT, but you can imagine closing that intersection is very difficult other than in the wee hours. But we will look into the contractor who's doing the utility district's evaluation and make sure that they understand their limitations of operation.
Recognize.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Well, at a minimum, right, you know, perhaps if there should be a traffic plan or something like that. And if it becomes, you know, to the extent that this is a major road, perhaps even a police detail so that we don't have anyone driving to the back of a truck because you don't have any warning signs prior to arriving right up on the tail end. And I know I seen it and it was like the most startling thing. And I'm just like, well, who do I call at this hour? You know, and it's like, I'm sorry, did you? Yeah, so that's really concerning, Mr. Evans. I mean, we got folks that's already bad enough that's texting and driving, you know, and I just hate to see, you know, something drastic happen like a accident when there should have been better safety measures in place. Thank you.
Councilwoman?
The
Melanson?
question I had, I wasn't, for September 5th, I thought that was a Wednesday, so I'm good.
Good. Okay. Mr. Evans, the signage, I know we mentioned earlier that we talked about digital signage in front of the library. So it's gonna be a digital sign, just not a standard sign. What's the purpose between going digital versus just regular?
Mr. Chair,
You recognize?
as you probably noticed on Channel 18 or you know, any opportunity that Mr. Brody has to put literature concerning the library in front of you, he's certainly going to do that. So the volume of programming that is occurring at the library is creating a burden on our digital signs and our marquees and the like. And so, you know, one of the things that Mr. Brody does have some monies that is set aside as it relates to state aid for other things. And so and since that is such a prominent location in the city, we thought that, hey, that's another opportunity to advertise, you know, other things that are happening within the community, public meetings and the like. And so that was the intent, to move with more of a digital sign to advertise library programming and activities in that particular area, as well as programming that's happening as a result of YEP, and then also to be in the city's inventory in some of the digital signs. And we are also looking at the opportunity for digital sign deployments throughout the city. Some other cities have looked to partner up with for-profit entities where the for-profit entity builds the sign, and then as a result, it's a sign that the city approves some of the content, and then there's an opportunity for community organizations to invariably advertise on that sign. And so
That's actually the direction where I was going, besides the fact I was gonna ask Mr. Brody, any material need to be announced tonight, any flyers, any events? You good? Okay. Well, thank you, sir. I'll read it for you if you.
I don't have the flyer, but I can tell you.
Go ahead, Mr. Brody.
This Saturday.
This Saturday.
This Saturday, there's going to be a digital resource class. Our adult librarian, April Giles, is going to facilitate a class about how to use BrainFuse Job Now.
Okay.
It's our virtual job and career resource.
What time?
11 a.m.
11 a.m.
Labor Day weekend.
Labor Day weekend, this Saturday, 11 a.m. Make sure the residents at home know about it. Thank you, Ms. Brody. Every time he brings me those flyers, so thank you, sir. And I appreciate it, Mr. Evans, with the digital sign. But the reason I was asking was because of the ad space, because that was actually my thought process. I haven't seen government agencies that have sold ad space, but why not be the first? And if it's possible or feasible to actually track that, I think that's where a marketing communications department would be perfect to take the lead on that to generate some additional revenue, because that's a $25 billion business. So I'm not sure how feasible it is with multiple ad space throughout digital signs throughout the city, but having those ads available as well for residents and for businesses. You're recognized.
Certainly, with the digital signs, we maintain the position that it's utilized for government purposes. But, the other option is something that we're looking into, and that's something that we would have to have the discussion with you all in the future if that was invariably something that we were to consider.
Additional comments from the board? No further business. Meeting's adjourned.